It's my great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's Captains of Industry talk and introduce our speaker this afternoon, Mick O'Connor, who I can confirm to you, having been working with Mick for the last year or so, he is truly a Captain of Industry. Mick is the founder of HAELO Consulting, Programme Director at the Spaceport in Prestwick. He's a Glasgow Caledonian's Royal Academy of Engineering visiting professor. I can tell you also, on top of all of that, he is also going to submit his PhD for examination later on this year. This afternoon, Mick will share his exceptional career journey, overcoming limiting beliefs, burning desire to change the world, and creating Europe's premier space hub. But first, a little more about Mick. Mick loves solving complex problems. The more complex, the better. He's worked in a variety of roles and industries and prides himself upon his ability to coalesce teams around converting abstract problems into workable solutions. Mick has over 40 years experience from apprentice welder, straight from school, to successfully leading the operations in space, defence, aerospace, shipbuilding, oil, petrochemical, construction, aviation, and manufacturing industries. In 2016, Mick founded HAELO, a company which specialises in the detection and emergence patterns in complex organisational ecosystems. The name HAELO is based on an old English Anglo-Saxon word for health and prosperity, chosen to reflect the mission of an increasing organisational resilience, health, and delivering results, prosperity. We're extremely grateful for everything you do for our university, Mick, and we're thrilled to have you back this afternoon with us to talk. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Mick O'Connor to deliver this afternoon's Captains of Industry talk. Thank you very much.
So thanks very much, Bruce. I think you've stolen my thunder in terms of some of the things I'm going to talk through on the slides, but that's fine. So thanks very much for that very flattering welcome. For the next 40 minutes, I will talk you through my career and some of the things that I've done, some of the things I've achieved, and some of the challenges I've overcome to get there. So as much as the next 40 minutes, I'll talk an awful lot about me. This is not about how wonderful I am at all. What this is about is helping people. And one of the things that I would certainly like to take away from this is if there was one person took one aspect of this away with them and in some way and helped them with their career, helped them in life, then that would be success to me. So what I'll do just now is I will share my screen. You just bear with me. Okay, so if you can let me know, Bruce, can you see that okay? Perfect. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, what this is about is success and how to achieve it. And what we'll touch on during the course of this is what exactly is success and what do we mean by it. But one of the key things for me is being confident just to dare to dream and push your own boundaries and push your own envelope. But what is it your dream? What would you really like to achieve? And one of the things that we will ask during the course of this is, well, do you know? So I'll go into that a bit later on. So what I'll cover is where my career began and in reality where I began and where I grew up. We'll talk about success and what do we mean by success and what does success look like, or what do we think it looks like? What does it really look like? We'll talk about some of the things that I'm involved in. So as Bruce mentioned, I'm involved in HAELO. I started HAELO a number of years ago, and that's all about people-powered intelligence. I'll also talk about the space industry, specifically in Scotland. I'll give you a brief overview of some of the stuff that I'm involved in, but I'll also talk more generally about Scotland's space industry. We'll talk about some of the work that I'm doing with Bruce on behalf of the Royal Academy of Engineering, and we've called this T-shaping graduates. And again, I'll get into that a wee bit more during the course of the presentation. And then there's a few takeaways at the end that hopefully will make some sense when we get to that final slide. So what I'll talk about is my career, and in brackets, my career so far. Still a long way from being over. I don't quite see myself ever retiring, because I don't think my career is ever truly going to come to an end. But I'll talk about what my career, what I've done in my career to date. I'll explain where it started. So this is me looking pretty glamorous with long hair and a moustache and beads. And that was me at 15. I probably look about 32, but that was me at 15. And the reason I show this picture is that was me 4 months from leaving school, had the equivalent of 2 Nat 5s, no plan and no clue what I wanted to do with my life at all. And here was me 7 weeks ago at an event at 10 Downing Street. And what I'll talk about is, how did I bridge that gap between that young boy at 15 with not very qualified, not overly confident, and no plans to where I am today, and what was that journey. So I'll share experiences of what I believe it takes to achieve your dreams. And I know in my case, the dreams that I set myself, and I would say that's pretty much everything that I've set out to achieve, I have. And I'll talk about what I did and what I had to do to achieve it. And it wasn't an easy journey, but I'll talk through what I did. And I'll talk through the effect of having limiting beliefs and how limiting beliefs can imprison your potential. Even if you have an inherent potential, how your beliefs, if you've not got the right beliefs, how that can in some way thwart your ambitions and thwart your potentials. What we'll talk about is how your future success is determined by what you believe and what you do today. And again, I'll get into this in a bit more detail during the course of the talk. So on the right-hand side is a picture of where I grew up, and that is in Belleville Street in the East End of Greenock. And when I put the slides together, the reason I included this is when I got involved with GCU as a visiting professor, I became aware of these multiple deprivation factors. And when we went through the process of becoming a visiting professor, we talked about MD20 and MD5. And this is all new to me. So MD, or multiple deprivation index, is a measure of poverty and deprivation. And I thought, as a matter of interest, I'd look at, well, where I grew up, where does that fit? Was it an MD20, an MD40, or somewhere in between? And to my horror, Belleville Street was MD5. So the poorest 5% of Scotland's population, some of them live in Belleville Street in the East End of Greenock. And that was important because at an early age in my life, that shaped me. I came from a loving family. I would look back and say I'd relatively a happy childhood. We certainly weren't affluent. The odd time I would get second-hand toys for Christmas. We wouldn't go holidays abroad, etc. But again, when I look back on it, certainly wasn't happy. But there was probably very little privilege in that regard. But I would say a lot of privilege in terms of a loving family around me. So I'm very grateful of that. But having lived that experience has driven me, and again, I'll touch on that later. So as part of this, I was neither academic nor sporty at school. And the reason that's important is, as a young person in your formative years, then what gives you that reinforcement that you're a good person and you're good at something? Well, if you're good at school and you're academic, you perhaps get accolades and recognitions that way. Or if you're good at sport, you get it in another way. So I was good at neither. And that tended to shape my my view, because what I considered that school, or perceived that school really valued, I was good at neither of those things. So one of the things the school then did, to not intentionally, I would say an unintended consequence, is in third year we were then educated for leisure. And what that meant was that we were then sent to the sports centre in Greenock on a Wednesday afternoon during the course of third and fourth year. And what that was preparing you for was periods of unemployment. So what can you do productively and constructively with that leisure time? So they sent us to the gym. And I'm sure good people came up with that. But what it actually did was put a stamp on your forehead and saying, well, you're not really going to aspire to a great deal. So we'll go and educate you for leisure. And what that did for me and my peer group, it cultivated, I would say subconsciously, some limiting beliefs about what you could and you couldn't achieve in life. And if you believe you can't, you won't. So you thought, well, what's the point? I'm not very good at maths, so I won't try very hard. I'm not very good at this, so I won't try. I won't put myself out there. That wasn't intentional, but I think over time you just cultivate those beliefs, and sometimes you're not even aware of them. And one of the important things we'll talk about today is having awareness of those limiting beliefs, because it can imprison your potential. You can have potential to achieve, but in some way you hold yourself back. And it was a chance circumstance during the course of second year in school that probably, I wouldn't say entirely changed my life, but certainly helped. And this is back in the day where you used to get the bell in school if you misbehaved. So normally I would be at the back of the class, and more often than not looking out the window. One of my sons has Asperger's, one of my sons has got dyslexia, and I see traits in them that I saw in myself. So it may well be that there's some undiagnosed conditions that I had, but regardless, I spent more time looking out the window and probably keeping other people off their work. So my teacher took a bit of a scunner to me and decided to give me the belt. And he then moved me to another part of there was a large cavernous room that we were in, and put me as far away from the other pupils as he possibly could. So I had no window to look out, I had no other people to annoy. And all I could do was work. And to my pleasant surprise, it was technical drawing. And to my pleasant surprise, I excelled at it because I had nothing else to do, and I applied myself. And Mr. McFarlane, who was my technical teacher, said the most positive thing that had ever been said about me up to that point as a 13-year-old, which was, Michael hides his light under a bushel. Now, I didn't quite know what he meant at that point in time. I think I did. But what he saw in me was potential that perhaps I didn't see in myself at that point in time, or perhaps starting to realise it purely from a technical perspective, a technical drawing perspective. And I think the important part of what Mr. McFarlane did was he placed a guiding hand on my shoulder. And I think no matter who you are, or what you do in life, or what stage you are in life or your career, then sometimes we just need that. We need somebody just to put their hand on their shoulder and just show us the way and just give us that guidance. And I think even to this day, I'm still indebted to people who still do that to me to this day. So I'm a big believer in action. I genuinely believe that the only thing that makes any kind of difference in life is taking action. I think you can be very bright. I think you can have lots of ideas and thoughts and views and plans. You can even create fancy PowerPoint slide decks. But unless you do anything and take action, nothing will actually change. So here's me. So the first thing is, 7 months after that picture was taken, when I was 16, I had the opportunity to become an apprentice, and an apprentice welder in the Clyde shipyards. And I can't understate the importance of apprenticeship to me personally, but I think just the importance of apprenticeships generally. And I think now, particularly the Scottish Government, I would say the UK Government, are really embracing the importance of apprenticeships, and I applaud them for that. And my instructor, a lad called Jim Beckett, in my first week of my apprenticeship, said to me, he says, "Son, get good at welding and the world is your oyster." And And again, wasn't quite sure what he meant, because at that point in time, my limiting beliefs meant that I would never live or work outside of Greenock or Inverclyde. And that really blew my mind. I says, well, what do you mean that the world is my oyster? And he says, well, you become a good welder and you can work anywhere you choose in the world. And I hadn't quite figured on that. So I saw this as an opportunity. And I think particularly, as I said, I didn't have a bad childhood. I wasn't the most affluent of childhoods. But I saw an opportunity to change my life. And I grabbed it, and I really grabbed it with both hands. And from there, for the following 5 years, I attended James Watt College, and I was the welding student of the year for 5 years in a row. And that culminated in my 4th year in becoming the Prince Philip Prize winner with the Glasgow Incorporation of Hammermen, which is for the best engineering student across colleges and universities across the whole of the west of Scotland. So that was a real seminal moment in me, because again, other people saw something in me and saw potential in me that perhaps I was only starting to realise that I had. So I'm indebted to the Hammermen. I am now a master of the Incorporation of Hammermen, together with Professor Bruce, and that's my way of saying thanks and my way of giving back. But I can't, I can't underplay or understate the importance of them to me, in terms of it changed my life from there on in. From there, I worked in the shipyards. I worked for a company called Scott Lithgow, and I was summoned to the managing director's office. And as a 20-year-old, never been in front of a managing director before, never been in those type of offices before, I was almost quaking in my boots, unnecessarily. So he was a good person, absolutely, really enthusiastic about the fact that I'd won this, really keen, saying, fantastic. I wish there was a few more young lads like you who were doing this and put themselves out there. And he says, what do you want to do next? And I said, well, I'd like to go on and do an HNC in mechanical engineering and then go on and do a degree. And he says, fantastic. He says, we'll support you. Couldn't believe it. So when I walked out his office, I felt like I was walking on air. I couldn't believe it. It was unheard of, the fact that somebody who was on the tools as an apprentice welder was being given this opportunity to be sponsored by the company to go and do an HNC and do a degree. Couldn't believe it. But then a number of days went by, and days became weeks, and weeks became months. And despite my pestering, nothing happened. So then eventually, one of what was previously HR, but they called it the personnel department at the time, took me to one side and says, we'll not be supporting you because welders are not clever enough to do degrees. And again, in terms of that seminal moment, I thought, no, my career and my life and my future is my choice. And I resigned immediately, and I took myself to college. So the future, my future in this case, was for me and for nobody else to decide. And that mantra shaped the rest of my career. And I wouldn't say just shaped the rest of my career, it shaped the rest of my life. Now, I didn't sit down and try and come up with a mantra, but I was actually in a taxi at that point in time. I was going to meet my girlfriend, and this thing popped into my mind. Now, why it popped into my mind at that point in time, I've got no idea, but I said something to myself that resonated, and it really stuck with me. And what that then did was, it then shaped some of the choices I made and some of the things that I did. So as Bruce has outlined earlier, I'm now a visiting professor of the Royal Academy of Engineering at GCU. I'm programme director at Prestwick Spaceport. I'm in the midst of doing a PhD. I'm a chartered engineer. I'm a chartered director. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Directors. I'm a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Engineering Scotland. I'm a master of the Glasgow Incorporation of Hammermen. And I started my own company, HAELO, back in 2016. And here are the companies I then worked for during the course of my career, either as an employee or as a consultant. But you can see there's a range of different companies I've worked with in different industries. And again, all different experiences, some fantastic experiences, some not so pleasant experiences. But again, all these experiences help to shape the person that I've become today. So in terms of the industries I've worked in industries building oil rigs, I've worked in oil refineries and petrochemical plants, I've worked in power stations, I've built warships, I've tested missile systems, I've repaired helicopter dynamic components, I've worked within the energy sector, I now work within the space sector, and I'll talk about that in a second. I developed software by accident back in 2017, and I'll talk about that in a second as well. As I mentioned earlier, it all started by starting as a welder and starting as an apprentice welder. So as I said earlier, I can't understate the importance of an apprenticeship to me personally, but I think the importance of apprenticeships generally. So success. So what does success mean? So this is a dictionary definition of success. So it's the accomplishment of an aim or a purpose. And I think the important thing here is that to me, success is very much something that's personal to you. So if you set yourself, that goal or that aim or that purpose or that outcome, when you achieve it, that's what success means and success looks like to you. Other people may view success and their success differently. So when people look from the outside in, and sometimes when I do these kind of talks, people consider success to look like this. And I'll call this the illusion of success. So this is what we think success looks like. So you start somewhere and you build and you build and you build it, and ultimately you achieve and you aspire to that goal or dream. And that's certainly not my experience of success. And I think success looks a wee bit more like this. It looks like, certainly in the middle, it looks a bit like wire wool. However, that is no bad thing, because sometimes in these kind of outlying areas, these are unintended things that just happen during the course of your career. They were not, you never anticipated you would do them. You certainly didn't plan to do them, but you had the opportunity to do them, and you grabbed it with both hands. So one of the things for me was back in 2000, I worked for BAE Systems. We were looking at building what they call the Type 45 destroyer. I was asked to look at the build strategy, and we concluded that we couldn't actually build those ships, not because of the capability and the competence of the people, but because of capacity. So what we'd have to do effectively was to break the ship into smaller parts, put them around the UK, and then integrate them in Glasgow and the Clyde. And coincidentally, another company called Caverna, a Norwegian company, operated the Govan shipyard at the time, and they decided they were pulling out of shipbuilding on the Clyde. So we as BAE Systems had the opportunity to acquire that yard. So I was involved in that early due diligence. Then we acquired the yard, and then I was appointed as integration manager. My job was to integrate the 2 yards of Govan and also what is known as Scotstoun. But again, never part of my career plan to do it, but a great experience, a really challenging experience. But again, no plan to do it. And then in 2017, I had developed a consultancy methodology, a consultancy framework. I took it to an organisation. I implemented it with them. They loved it. They thought it was fantastic. They gave me some really nice testimonials. And at the end of it, one of the guys said, right, this is fantastic, Mickey, you're now going to develop software. And as I say to people, back in that time, I could hardly spell the word software. So software isn't what I do. I don't have a background in developing code. I don't have a background in IT. So developing software certainly wasn't something I had planned to do, but it was an opportunity. So I spoke to the operations director, and I says, look, I believe you may be interested in some software if I developed it. And he said, well, if you could develop software that supported the framework, we'd bite your arm off. So I took myself away for a couple of months, took myself in a darkened room, and I thought, where do you start? How do you develop software? But as an engineer, I thought, okay, let's define the problem. Let's start to build a solution. Let's start to build an architecture around it. And then we get some clever folk to do the coding. I took it back to the company, and then they bought the software. And really, I've developed the concept since then. But again, never part of my plan, but it may be one of the best decisions ever made in my life. So for me, the three conditions that predicate success, the first one is desire. What is it you want to achieve? You know, not necessarily what you want to achieve in life, but what is it you want to achieve? And do you know? And I think in terms of achieving success or achieving your dreams, you've got to have a very, very clear view in your mind what it is you want to achieve. And importantly, why you want to achieve it. But you need to have a real burning desire and a burning want to achieve whatever that happens to be. The second condition is belief. And as I mentioned earlier, we talked about limiting beliefs. If you've got a burning desire to achieve something and you don't believe you can, then you won't. You know, you won't put in the extra yards, the extra effort. You won't put in effort at all because you've sabotaged yourself. You won't believe you can achieve it. So what is the point? So again, when I was young, mathematics was beyond what my capability was. I couldn't believe I could do it. I was rubbish at it. Therefore, what's the point in even trying? And in later life, I found, of course, I could do mathematics, but I created that belief in my mind, and that stopped me doing certain things. So again, having that burning desire and knowing what you want to achieve, having an inherent belief you can achieve it, and then commitment to do it. And I would say that there's nothing in my career has came easy. It's all taken hard work. It's taken a bit of stress. It's taken some sleepless nights, but it's taken absolute commitment. But I firmly believe that if you've got a desire to achieve something, you believe you can, and you're willing to commit to it, you will achieve. And I know in my career and later life, that whatever I've genuinely set my heart to, I have achieved. But I would say it's never been easy. So my own company, HAELO, so where did it come from? Well, it started with a significant emotional event. I used to manage missile test and evaluation ranges up and down the UK. To your right here, you'll see an exercise called Formidable Shield, and that was a rocket that was fired from the Hebrides. It was simulating a ballistic missile attack, and that went into space. So when we talk about Scotland's space industry and could we put rockets into space from Scotland, the answer is yes. Why? Because we've already done it. So in 2017, we put a rocket into space, 320 kilometres into space from Scottish soil. We've already done it. So an event occurred back in 2005. I want to talk to you about the event itself, but it shook me to my very foundations. And after we'd gone through a process and we understood what the event was and how we'd manage our way through it, what it made me realise was a couple of things. It introduced me to a thing called VUCA. Now, that is not some Glaswegian swear word. It's actually worse than any Glaswegian swear word you can consider. So VUCA is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And no matter, particularly when you're managing organisations, no matter how well you plan to achieve a goal, an objective, an outcome, VUCA is what conspires against you because things change, you've got uncertainty, you've got complexity, and you've got that ambiguity. So the challenge of leadership is how you navigate through VUCA to achieve whatever your intended outcome, your desired outcome is. So the event made me consider the importance of what I call here human, which is human intelligence, and how much human intelligence and human potential is squandered. And I would say every organisation I've worked in, GC may be the exception, but every organisation I've worked in, human intelligence is squandered. And what I wanted to find was a better way of capitalising on human intelligence that was inherent within organisations. So in 2005, I vowed to find better ways for leaders to lead. And that's something that still sits with me up until this day. So I am on a mission. I'm on a mission to change the world and explain some of the things that I'm looking to do to do that. So as Bruce mentioned earlier, I founded HAELO Consulting in 2016. It is the old English phrase for what they call good HAELO, which means health and prosperity. And I apply that to organisations. So the healthier an organisation is, the more likelihood it is that it will achieve whatever results it sets itself. However, and I would say in organisations and perhaps in education to some degree, we are very deterministic in the way in which we educate. So A plus B equals C. If you don't get the answer C, then A must be missing or B is missing, or they're both missing. But it's very logical and it's very deterministic and it's very reductionist in its approach. In reality, the world looks a wee bit more like this. And this is where VUCA lives. You know, it might well be that if you're operating within a closed system, you can be quite deterministic where A plus B does equal C. But as soon as you apply that within a wider ecosystem, then things become slightly more challenging. So I'm on this mission to liberate what I call people-powered intelligence, that latent human intelligence that resides within every organization that is not necessarily used to best effect. So how do we liberate that? And what I'm looking to do is to apply that to complex systems to detect and respond to anomalous conditions that may manifest themselves. And what I'm looking at now is what we call RegTech, which is regulatory technology, as it applies to cybersecurity, specifically within the financial sector. But again, in terms of what I'm developing as a software, you can apply it to any industry, you can apply it outside of cybersecurity, but as a beachhead market, for me to be laser focused, it's about RegTech, cybersecurity within the financial sector. So how do we deal with VUCA within any organization? So volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity, we do this and we create one of these things, an organization chart, which is rubbish. They don't work. All an organization chart does at best is say, this is the person you report to. This is the person that might sit down with you once a month and do a performance review or set your objectives. But in terms of the workings of an organization and how you contend with complexity, it is useless. They create silos, they inhibit interaction between different parts of the organization. So the right-handed organization and the left-handed organization don't know what each other's doing. So that introduces ambiguity within an organization. So as part of my PhD, so how do I see an organization? And I think an organization may look more like this. And even this probably could never truly represent the complexity of an organization. So to me, an organization is a social network. And you've got lots of actors within that network. You can either have biotic actors, you've got human beings, or abiotic actors, you've got things and processes and equipment and systems, etc. Either exist within the organization or outside it. So it might be regulators, it might be your competitors, it may be your customers, it may be your suppliers, it may be changes in the economy or society, but there's a whole load of things that exist within that ecosystem around your organization that will conspire against your ability to achieve your desired outcomes. And what I want to understand is how can we best represent that? And then when we start to see the manifestation of anomalous conditions, how do we detect and respond to those in the shortest order? Because the quicker we do it, the less exposure the organization will have to risks. So that's what I'm working on at the moment with my business. In terms of space and spaceflight in Scotland, you may know some of this stuff. I think some of it may be new to you, but I'll talk you through it. So in Scotland, we're developing 5 spaceports at the moment, 3 vertical spaceports and 2 horizontal. So the first one is Prestwick Spaceport that I'm involved in. The second one is Machrihanish, which is also horizontal launch spaceport. We've then got Spaceport 1, which is in North Uist. We've got Space Hub Sutherland, which is in the Moyne Peninsula in the north of Scotland. And then we've got Saxaboard Spaceport, which is on the Shetland. We've got Orbex as a launch vehicle manufacturer. So they design and manufacture the rockets. And we've also got Skyrora, based in Edinburgh and also in Cumbernauld. And we're working with a company called Astraeus, who will provide our launch vehicle and range control and mission control. So what's the difference between vertical and horizontal? So vertical classically is a long, thin cylinder We've got energy comes out the back end of it, and it propels it upwards and propels it into space. So that's coming from a fixed launch pad from Earth. We, on the other hand, horizontal, similar to Virgin Orbit, we use a horizontal platform, which is a carrier aircraft that then deploys the launch vehicle. So it pulls it out on chutes. So it pulls a drogue chute, a main chute, stabilization chutes, retardation chutes. It then detaches and then autonomously makes its way to orbit. Unlike Virgin, we don't have a dedicated carrier aircraft by design. What we use is a C-17 Globemaster III aircraft. And what that means to us is that we can have some redundancy built within the system. So if the aircraft went unserviceable, we're not just confined to one aircraft or one carrier aircraft alone. In terms of what we're doing in Prestwick, and I would say what we're doing across Scotland, but I'll concentrate specifically on central Scotland. We're looking at building Europe's premier space cluster. So if we start with the Prestwick Spaceport, so we are building the multi-mission launch spaceport and a space hub. 50% of all the aerospace jobs in Scotland are already based at Prestwick. So companies such as BAE Systems and Spirit, Aerosystems and GE are already there. There's over 100 space companies operating in central Scotland that you may or may not already know. Glasgow is the European centre for small satellite manufacture. So 40% of all the small satellites manufactured in Europe are manufactured in Glasgow, and that percentage is only going to increase. So companies such as Spire, R3 IoT, and AC Clydespace are examples of excellent companies based in Glasgow. Edinburgh, on the other hand, is considered as Europe's data capital. Companies such as GSI, Ecometrica, and Earthblocks. And as you'll recognise, we've got some world-class universities, not least GCU, but we've got Strathclyde, and we've got UWS, and Glasgow, and Eric Watt, and Napier. There's a range of universities in close proximity to what we're doing both in Edinburgh and Prestwick and Glasgow, for that matter. We're well connected. And the reason this is important is within a 55-kilometre radius, we've got this concentration of space expertise. And we don't think there's a place anywhere else on the face of the earth that can say that. There's some fantastic universities out there. There's some great places to launch a rocket. There's some great manufacturers and satellite manufacturers out there. But in terms of that concentration, we don't think there's another place like it on Earth. So as part of what we're involved in, which is Space Scotland, what we're looking at doing is how can we then collaborate to best effect for the individual organisations and for Scotland and Scotland's economy and for the UK more generally. So in terms of the role I have working closely with Professor Bruce, so I became the Royal Academy of Engineering Visiting Professor last year, and that's for 4 things. So it's for employability, enterprise, entrepreneurship, and engineering. And when I initially approached Bruce about this, I said, look, what I'm seeing is too many young graduates coming into industry who are not fully prepared. I think academically prepared, but there are certain things that we in industry require graduates to be comfortable with or understand, and many of them don't, and some of them struggle. They don't all struggle, but some of them do. So we then built a case that we presented to the Royal Academy, and I'm delighted to say they then accepted it. So what we're looking at is T-shaping our graduates. So having that depth in terms of that technical understanding and technical competence, but having a broader understanding, not just of their technical discipline. So a number of things that we looked at, firstly, was what we're calling meta skills. And I'm going to touch on that in a second, but really important in terms of how your ability to collaborate with other human beings, to communicate, just to know yourself is really important. And again, I've seen too many graduates coming in and perhaps struggling to express themselves, perhaps not being able to communicate particularly clearly, not wanting to work and collaborate with other people, not being very good listeners, not being empathetic. These are really important skills that we value in industry, and to some degree as equal as technical skills. So technical skills are really important, but we need to balance it off with perhaps what people would call interpersonal skills. What they're not is soft skills, because from my experience, what we regard as soft skills is actually the harder stuff to do. What we also looked at as well was enterprise entrepreneurship. How do we look through complexity? So it's okay to come up with a solution, but when you've then got volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity conspiring against you, how do you still succeed? Managing change and transformation, how do you go about doing that? Innovating technically feasible and commercially viable solutions. And where this is really important, I think, particularly from an engineering technical perspective, is you can come up with very, very elegant technical solutions, but are they commercially viable? So could they sell in the market? To me, the balance is having something that's technically feasible and equally commercially viable. That's what a good product looks like. And then engineering management and governance, risk and compliance. A couple of other things we're looking at is how do we create dilemma? So if we want to develop meta skills, how do they behave under pressure? How do we create that dilemma to then test people and just understand how would you behave in a stressful situation? And then industry masterclasses, and we've done one of these already on meta skills with some people come in from Thales, from Kinetic, from Serco, from R3IoT in Glasgow. And these were people who are talking about the reason they valued meta skills and interpersonal skills. And when you go for an interview as a postgrad, so if you go, you've passed your degree, you're sitting in an interview room, everybody else that's sitting there has got a similar degree to you. So what differentiates you from anybody else in that room is you, and it's your character. And what companies are looking for is, well, tell us about you. Who are you and what do you stand for? And it's really important. And one example that R3IoT gave was they interviewed, it happened to be a young lad a number of months ago, very, very bright, very intelligent, but they felt he just wouldn't fit with the culture within that organization. So he didn't get the role. And that was all down to meta skills. So what we've agreed to do with the senior management group is focus on those 5 areas to the right-hand side of that diagram in the short term, but we will evolve this over time. So in terms of meta skills and know thyself, as I've described it, there are 3 key areas. So there's self-management, social intelligence, and innovation. So that's about resilience, integrity, focus, and initiative under self-management. It's about how you communicate, how you feel, and how are you an empathetic person? Do you sense, what other people are feeling, and can you be sympathetic towards it? Do you collaborate? Are you a good team player? And do you lead? And what I've seen in many occasions is graduates coming into industry on a graduate training program, and perhaps within 3 or 6 months, they're managing small teams of perhaps other graduate trainees. But what they're expected to is to lead and to have the ability to communicate and listen and collaborate. So very, very quick. I mean, and organizations do this deliberately because they want to test you and understand, well, is it something you're naturally good at, or is it something we need to help you with and give you some support and some training in? And then innovation is about, being curious, the ability to make sense, the ability to be creative, and critical thinking. So the 3 I would highlight, and again, not for any particular reason, is resilience. I think that during COVID, I think it affected all of us. We all had to learn to be more resilient than perhaps we were before the start of COVID, but it's how to take the knocks when things don't necessarily go to plan. As I mentioned earlier, I can look back at my career. There are many things I'm pleased I did, and it wasn't easy, and there was a lot of knocks. And sometimes, I had to pick myself up and dust myself down and get back in amongst it. I couldn't just go in a corner and cry myself. I had to get back in amongst it. So it's that grit and that determination to work our way through, even when things don't necessarily go the way you planned. And very rarely, in my experience, do things go exactly as you planned. Teamworking and collaboration is really important. So when you come into industry, you don't get the opportunity to just go and sit in a corner and play with a laptop. That's not how it works. You need the ability to work with other human beings and interact with other human beings. It's fundamentally important. And sense making, particularly when you're in a complex environment, if you want to come up with creative, innovative new products that are technically feasible and commercially viable, is how do you make sense? Where are the gaps and where are the spaces in the market? Where are the problems worth solving and the problems that a company would, or a customer would pay you to solve, is that requires the ability to make sense of something that is complex when it comes to the market. You know, what is the problem that's worth solving? So in terms of the key takeaways that I'd ask you just to have a think about, the first thing is firstly, get yourself out of your comfort zone. The place that I learned most was when I was least comfortable. So when I had the opportunity to develop software, I was very uncomfortable, did not have a clue. When I had the opportunity then to integrate two shipyards, I'd never done anything like that before, but there's certain skill sets that I had. I thought, okay, I can find my way through it. I just don't know how, but I was confident enough to think, well, I will find a solution in the fullness of time. But get out of your comfort zone. Challenge your beliefs. As we touched on earlier, it's all about desire, beliefs, and commitment. And if your beliefs are working against your desire, you will not achieve what you'd set out to achieve. You've got to challenge your beliefs. If it's a requirement to come and do a speech and do public speaking, and you don't like doing it, you will shy away from it. If that's something you think is necessary for you to achieve your aspirations, your dreams, your goals, you've got to get comfortable with it. And it's not comfortable. And I remember, you know, public speaking in my case, I hated it. I didn't like doing it. I wasn't very confident. I would dread it weeks before, even months before. But the more you do it, the more you get comfortable, you then start to hardwire yourself and you can do it. But likewise, whatever your limiting beliefs are, is recognize them, recognize the effect it's having on you, and work to overcome them. And there's no magic bullet. It won't happen overnight, but you just need to work at it. Take action. In my belief, my view is, it is the only thing that makes a difference. I say you can have all sorts of intentions, plans, thoughts, no matter how much potential you've got, no matter how bright you are, no matter how well qualified you are, unless you take action, nothing will change. Seek opportunities and grab them with both hands. And sometimes, again, when I look at some examples, you know, whether it's a software, whether it's integration or others, I didn't know how in some instances, but I thought I will find the how. It was an opportunity, it was worth grabbing. I grabbed it with both hands, and you work out the how and the way. Now that's scary. Sometimes you feel a bit of an imposter, but sometimes you just got to grab it and run with it and have the belief and the confidence you can. And if you believe you can, you will. And there's no such thing as failure. You know, no matter what I've set myself, sometimes I've set myself aspirations and I've achieved them. Sometimes I've maybe not achieved them first time, not even second time, maybe third time. But it's having that ability to say, okay, why didn't I achieve what I'd set out to achieve? And learning from it and applying that learning. But there's no such thing as failure. It's only feedback. And if there's one really important point for you, and one of the things that I was not good at was what I'll describe as taking in the view. So I would set myself some really ambitious goals. Sometimes my ambitions, and many times my ambition ran before my ability. And I put myself in a really, really scary situation. You know, my stomach was in a knot continually. I would set out to achieve a goal and I would achieve it, but I wouldn't recognize I achieved it. I wouldn't celebrate it. I'd be focused on where's my next goal. So again, I think the important thing is, yeah, it's one thing to set goals and work towards achieving them, but enjoy the journey and take in the view. And remember, success is all about desire, having that burning desire to achieve, but it's been clear on what you want to achieve. And more importantly, why do you want to achieve it? And even what's the cost of achieving it? The belief that you can. Again, as I said, if you don't believe you can, then you'll find excuses, you'll find reasons, and you'll self-sabotage. And commitment, it takes hard work and it takes effort. But if you've got a desire and you're clear on where you want to go, you believe you can achieve it, you challenge yourself, and you commit to it, you will. And the final thing is dare to dream. Thanks very much for listening.
Excellent, 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 excellent. Just while I think you need to stop sharing your screen, Mick, just so that people can come back in. Just a couple of comments I would say before we start to get into the questions, if that's okay. I love that believe in yourself, self-belief. And it makes me think of something that Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple, was asked, why did you ever developed the Apple computer. And he said because he personally really wanted one. It was as simple as that. Largest company around. VUCA, I really like that. It's very interesting, and it's quite interesting how that aligns with the GCU values of integrity, creativity, responsibility, and confidence. So you can see how that could map directly towards that. And just one last thing I would say, very interesting, your map on the space industry, because in some ways I'm going to use your phrase here. The Scottish space industry, or Space Scotland, is hiding its own light under a bushel just at the moment. Yeah. So I think that's something to think about. Now, I see there's a couple of hands up and some questions already. We will go to the pre-submitted questions, if that's okay. So first question up, if that's okay. Mick, if you've drawn breath. Incidentally, that 40 odd minutes you were talking for seemed like it was about 5 minutes. So well done on that. First of all, if we had a question submitted by Nadine, who's a graduate. And she says, you had the opportunity to work in many industries with high environmental impacts. In the recent years, which of these industries have dramatically reduced their carbon footprint / local pollution? In which way are new technological advances responsible for those changes?
Okay. So where I would start, what am I seeing in industry? So again, there's some industries that I've worked in that I've not worked in for some time. So I couldn't comment with any confidence in terms of what they're specifically doing. What I would say in twofold is attitudes towards sustainability, caring for the environment, net zero, have, I would say, in my opinion, have profoundly changed. And I wouldn't say that as a direct consequence of COP26. I think there was a heightened focus on it. There was more discussion on it than ever before. But I think it's settled back. But what I would say is that if I look at my own experience and what I'm involved in, even today, then sustainability is a conversation that happens. If it's not mentioned every day, it's mentioned every other day. So to me, the first important thing is I think it's now part of people's consciousness. I think people are now aware of it, the importance of it, the effect of it, and are actively working to do something about it. A good practical example of the space industry, I talked about Skyrora, who is a manufacturing facility in Cumbernauld. Again, a great company doing some great stuff. And one of the things that they're looking at is creating a biofuel to propel their rocket, which is fine. But what they've done is they've developed a thing called Ecocene. And Ecocene is made of reclaimed plastics. So it's taking all that discarded plastics, chopping them up, melting them down, taking the constituent parts, and then creating fuel. So it's one example of, I would say, a company being aware of creating a sustainable product, but not just as a product, but then using waste products and repurposing them and reusing them. So again, that is one example. But as I said, I think for me, and I think the heartening thing for me, I would say in industry, if I look at shipbuilding industry, when I was in that, the oil industry, for example, there was never any mention of sustainability or carbon footprint effect. And that's not that people didn't care. Maybe they didn't care enough. But I would say on a positive note, it's very much in the forefront of people's minds. It's certainly in the forefront of mine as a program director for Prestwick Spaceport, because we're looking at the manufacture of the vehicle, we're looking at the fuel type we're using, we're looking at the building, what materials of construction we're using for the building, we're looking at concrete and saying, well, what can we do to use the right materials that have minimal impact on the environment and is sustainable? So to me, that's the biggest positive. But I think from a technology perspective, it probably still needs to have the impact I think it will. But I would say the most positive thing is I think people are more switched on to it now and they're talking about it. And I genuinely think people care about it more than they ever did now.
Okay. All right, thanks very much for that. Now, I can just stress to everybody, there is, we have got limited time, so I'm going to take only a couple more questions that were pre-supplied. This is one very quick question. Maybe we could just, how far away in time do you think we are from commercial space travel? You could just give us a quick answer on that one, Mick, so in your view.
Yeah, commercial space travel is with us now. I think that it would be commercial, or probably affordable commercial space travel is like what most people would be really interested in. Can I afford to go to space? And I would anticipate in terms of when it gets to a point where it become affordable to, I wouldn't say most people, but I think affordable to the common person, not multi-billionaires. I would think somewhere between the next 20 and 50 years. I think the trajectory at the moment, I think there is a likelihood that will become more affordable. Maybe not for everybody, but as I said, it might well be that some of us could maybe afford it who are billionaires or even millionaires for that matter.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. What's the best way as a student to gain a foothold in industry? What's the best way as a student to gain a foothold in industry? Okay,
so I think that one of my slides I talked about follow your passions or follow your dreams. So what I would say for any student looking to enter industry is, firstly, what is it you want to do in industry, and be clear on that. Now, I understand when you leave university, perhaps you just want, if you get a job offer, you take that first job offer, and I can understand that. However, I think the first thing is, what industry do you want to work in and why? And then do some research and understand, which companies are the companies that then do the types of things that I want to do, and approach them. The amount of occasions where I employed people where an unsolicited letter came in with a CV that was then placed in my desk, and it might well be just fortuitous to say, this person looks good, let's just get them in for an interview, even though we weren't looking for somebody, even though there wasn't a recruitment campaign at the time. Just something came across your desk when you were least expecting it. I think it's good advice. When you are in a situation where hundreds of CVs are going across your desk, that's the worst time to get yourself noticed, because more and more often than not, particularly in my role, sometimes you may spend 30 seconds looking at a CV and that's it. And if it didn't catch your eye, then it didn't go any further. I'm not saying that's right, because it's not right, but you're busy, you've got lots of leads to get through, and doesn't necessarily get the attention I would say that it merits. But again, if you've got an interest, do your research, decide what companies do the things that you would like to be involved in, make an approach to them unsolicited, and you never know.
Excellent. Okay, so last question then from the pre-prepared questions. This is from Billy Hare, member of staff. Do you think you've peaked yet, or is there still higher for you to go?
Good question, Billy. I've not been asked that one before. I would say that, and I think it's relative to as I said earlier, what is success, and what does success mean to you? What does it mean to me? And what does it mean to Billy in this case? So I've done what I've done. At the moment, I don't see myself ever retiring. Maybe 10, 15 years might take a slightly different view. I don't see myself ever retiring. I'm in a position now with my own business that all I do is get involved in adventures. I get involved in stuff that I want to get involved in. I get involved in stuff like the Arrange VP, working with yourself, Bruce. I get involved with working with people that I want to work with. So I think it depends how you measure success, but certainly there's still petrol left in the tank. As I said, I've got the PhD to get myself through during the course of this year. I moved my business into the new Barclays campus, into the Eagle Labs. That's where I'll then start to put more traction under cyber security within regulated technology. And then depending on where that goes, I'll then open it up to perhaps the rail industry, the nuclear industry, other industries. And then who knows where it'll go after that. But I think the key thing, as I said, I think life's a bit of an adventure. Opportunities will manifest themselves. So I'm looking at a horizon over the next 6 to 12 months, I know what I'm doing. After that, it'll just be another adventure.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, look, I'm sorry, we do have to call a halt, bring an end to the questions. I wonder if you would all be good enough to join me in the normal manner of thanking Mick, showing our appreciation in the normal manner. Thank you very much, Mick.
Thank you very much. Been a fantastic audience.
Can I just say, this is the last of the Captains of Industry talk, and a very warm thanks to Mick for delivering that for us. The next talk is currently under planning, and it should be sometime around about October this year. I'd further like to, as well as thank Mick for his time this afternoon, I'd like to thank Sophie and John from the GC Foundation Alumni Development for helping set all this up, etc., etc. I don't know how we'll deal, maybe I'll speak with Sophie and Mick after this on how we'll deal with the questions that came in that we didn't get a chance to answer. We'll come up with some mechanism for doing that. I can tell everyone that Mick now does have a location on GCU. He does have a desk here. So we'll make sure that you know where he is and how to contact him. Thank you very much.